The music was bright, the flowers glowed beneath the afternoon sun, and everyone around me looked as if they belonged there. I didn't. I had almost turned around and walked back to my car after realizing I barely knew the groom anymore. But fate has a strange way of keeping people exactly where they need to be. As I took the only empty seat near the center aisle, the young woman beside me leaned closer without looking at me. Her hands trembled ever so slightly as she whispered only 5 words that changed everything. "Pretend you know me." In that single moment, a joyful wedding became something far deeper than celebration. It became the beginning of a story neither of us expected, one built on fear, courage, trust, and the extraordinary kindness of strangers. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness and second chances can completely change a person's life, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Storyverse. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories that remind us humanity still exists. My name is Rowan Mercer, and I had accepted the invitation mostly out of obligation. The groom, Elliot, had been my college roommate years earlier before life carried us toward different cities and different dreams. We exchanged birthday messages and the occasional holiday greeting, but nothing more. When his invitation arrived, I almost declined. Instead, I drove 3 hours to a beautiful countryside estate where sunlight poured across endless gardens, children chased butterflies between white chairs, and every guest seemed connected through laughter and memories I no longer shared. I found comfort only in remaining unnoticed, settling into my chair moments before the ceremony began. That was when I noticed the woman beside me. She wore a pale blue dress that matched the summer sky, but there was nothing peaceful in her expression. Her fingers gripped her purse so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. She kept glancing toward the entrance with unmistakable panic. Then she whispered those unforgettable words, asking me to pretend I knew her. There was no explanation, only quiet desperation. Instinct told me she wasn't playing a prank. She looked genuinely frightened, and without fully understanding why, I nodded almost imperceptibly. For the next several minutes, I acted naturally, leaning over occasionally as though we were longtime friends exchanging quiet observations about the ceremony. She gradually relaxed, though only slightly. I noticed an older man standing near the back of the venue. Unlike everyone else smiling toward the bride, his attention remained fixed on the woman beside me. Every time she shifted in her chair, his eyes followed. When our eyes briefly met, something inside me tightened. There was no warmth in his expression. It was calculation disguised beneath a pleasant smile. During the applause after the vows, he started walking in our direction, but as guests crowded the aisle to congratulate the newlyweds, he disappeared into the gathering. Beside me, the woman finally released a slow breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. Only after the ceremony ended did she introduce herself as Marin. Her smile was polite but exhausted, the kind of smile people wear after surviving something invisible. She thanked me repeatedly for helping without asking questions. I told her she didn't owe me an explanation, but she quietly insisted that someday I deserved one. Before she could continue, someone called my name across the lawn. Elliot embraced me warmly, apologizing for losing touch over the years and insisting I stay for the reception. When I looked back, Marin had disappeared into the sea of guests. The afternoon unfolded beneath bright daylight as music floated across the gardens and waiters carried sparkling drinks between tables. Yet despite the celebration, I couldn't stop searching for Marin. Eventually I spotted her standing alone near a fountain, watching families dance with their children. She looked less afraid now but somehow even lonelier. I joined her without speaking. Sometimes silence is kinder than curiosity. After several minutes, she quietly admitted that the man from the ceremony had spent nearly a year trying to force his way back into her life after an abusive relationship. Every legal boundary she created seemed to inspire another attempt from him to appear unexpectedly. He rarely broke the law outright, but he constantly reminded her he was watching. Seeing him arrive at the wedding after discovering through mutual acquaintances where she would be had shattered the confidence she had spent months rebuilding. She chose my empty seat because I looked calm, ordinary, and trustworthy. She hoped that appearing accompanied would discourage him. She never imagined I would actually help. Listening to her story, I felt ashamed by how often we overlook silent suffering. Around us, hundreds of smiling guests celebrated love while one woman fought invisible fear only a few feet away. It reminded me that appearances reveal almost nothing about the burdens people carry. I shared something I had never spoken about at social gatherings. My younger sister had once endured emotional abuse from someone everyone else admired. We had missed the signs because she became remarkably skilled at pretending everything was fine. By the time she finally admitted the truth, years of confidence had already been stolen from her. I promised myself then that if someone ever silently asked for help again, I would never ignore it. Perhaps that promise had brought me to this very chair beside Marin. As daylight softened into the golden glow of late afternoon, the reception became livelier. Guests laughed over speeches and old stories while children ran across the grass. Marin slowly began smiling for real. She even laughed when I accidentally spilled lemonade across my own jacket after being startled by a playful flower girl. For the first time that day, she looked like someone remembering what peace felt like. But happiness often arrives hand in hand with uncertainty. While returning from the dessert table, I noticed the same older man standing near the parking area watching us again. This time there was no mistaking his intentions. The expression on his face carried quiet frustration because his plan to isolate her had failed. Without creating a scene, I discreetly informed one of the wedding coordinators, who immediately contacted venue security. They already knew guests had reported an unfamiliar man wandering restricted areas. Minutes later, security approached him and politely escorted him away after confirming he had entered using someone else's invitation. No dramatic confrontation followed. No shouting. No violence. Just the quiet removal of someone who had mistaken persistence for power. Marin watched from across the lawn, tears filling her eyes not because she was frightened anymore but because, perhaps for the first time in months, someone believed her fear before demanding proof. That evening, as sunlight painted the sky with shades of orange and gold, the bride and groom released dozens of white balloons into the warm breeze. Everyone looked upward, smiling at the beautiful sight. Marin stood beside me, silently watching them disappear into the endless blue. She admitted she had almost stayed home that morning because fear had convinced her happiness belonged to other people. Yet a random seat beside a complete stranger had reminded her that goodness still existed in unexpected places. I realized then that neither of us had attended the wedding merely to witness two people begin their marriage. We had both arrived needing to rediscover faith in humanity. Months passed before we met again. One crisp autumn afternoon I received a handwritten letter. Inside was an invitation to a community center opening. Marin had used her experience to help establish a support program for people escaping emotional abuse. She thanked me for one simple decision that afternoon, choosing compassion over indifference. I attended proudly. The building wasn't grand or luxurious, but every room overflowed with hope. Volunteers welcomed frightened families, counselors listened without judgment, and children laughed freely in a safe play area. Watching Marin greet each visitor with quiet confidence, I almost couldn't recognize the terrified woman who had whispered to me at the wedding. Courage had not erased her scars. It had transformed them into bridges leading others toward healing. Standing outside afterward beneath another beautiful daytime sky, she admitted something remarkable. She no longer remembered the exact words spoken during the wedding ceremony. She couldn't recall the menu or the music either. But she would remember forever that a stranger chose kindness before asking for reasons. Sometimes the smallest acts become the biggest turning points in someone else's life. We spend so much time believing heroes wear uniforms or possess extraordinary abilities that we forget ordinary compassion can rescue a person just as profoundly. Life continued carrying us along separate paths, but we remained close friends. Every holiday we exchanged letters reflecting on how unpredictable destiny can be. Whenever people asked how we met, they expected a romantic story. Instead, we always smiled and said we met because someone whispered for help and someone else simply listened. That answer often surprised them, but it was the complete truth. Not every meaningful relationship begins with romance. Some begin with courage. Others begin with empathy. The strongest ones often begin with both. Years later I attended another wedding. As I searched for my assigned seat, I noticed a nervous young man sitting alone near the aisle looking hopelessly out of place. Across from him sat an elderly woman whose hands shook slightly as guests hurried past without noticing her. I smiled to myself before sitting beside them both, making easy conversation until they relaxed. It struck me that kindness has a beautiful habit of multiplying. Once someone changes your life through compassion, you naturally begin offering that same compassion to others. The world becomes brighter one quiet decision at a time. If this story touched your heart or reminded you that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's future, please like this video, share it with friends and family, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Storyverse. Your support inspires us to keep bringing stories that restore hope.